Hello friends, in this session we are going to see Hibernate name query. In our previous session we have already discussed HQL, that is Hibernate query language, and HCQL, that is Hibernate criteria query language. In these two things we have just seen how to use the query, but we have not seen how to use this query into the real-time example of a Hibernate. So Hibernate name query is providing a way through which we can use this HQL and HCQL into our Hibernate program. Also, rather than using this query in a scattered way throughout the Java code, we can provide some kind of way or a mechanism through which we just define a query once and we can use it in an entire program. So there are two ways to define the name query in the Hibernate. As we have already discussed, one is using XML file and another is using annotation. Let us first discuss how to use with the annotation. If you want to implement Hibernate name query via annotation, you must have to understand this two annotation: name queries and name query. Name queries annotation is used to define multiple queries, and name query annotation is used to define the single name query. Actually, we are using name query inside the name queries. Even though if you are going to use only a single query, you can also define name query annotation within the name queries. See this example. At name queries, we have one query at name query. Now we must have to provide the aliasing name of a query, that is, we have provided a name like find employee by name. So rather than using query every time, we just have to use this name only. Now what is this query basically? So it's a from employee E, where E dot name is equal to this name, where employee is your Java class, E it's its object, name its property. So E dot name is equal to this name which we are passing. So this is how we can represent any kind of name query. Let us see its program. Example of Hibernate name query by annotation. For this we must have to understand three pieces of code. One is your persistent class, that is employee.java. One other is your Hibernate cfg.xml, which we have already discussed. This is the configuration file. As it is annotation, Hibernate mapping file will not be there, and this is the single application fetch demo, again a Java program through which we can fetch the record, or we can use this entire thing. So in this example, the table name is EM. EM is the table name which contain 4 columns: ID, name, job and salary. So we must have to create one persistent class which is actually a Java bean class having these 4 properties as an annotation and certain other thing which represent its table name. So let us see employee.java using annotation. So this is a persistent class. Again, it's a persistent class, so we have to define query within this class only. So at name queries, multiple queries representation. At name query, single query representation. This is your actual query from employee E, where E dot name is equal to column name, and this is your query. Its name, alias name is find employee by name. You can give any name which in turns representing your query. Now as we all know that @entity define, it's a class. @table which define this class representing this table EM. This is the class name, and this class having toString method. We all know that the toString method, whenever you are going to use or printing the object of any class, then toString method will be called. So it return the result ID, name, salary or job, or we can say that it's an entire tuple. ID is your primary key, integer ID, string name is another parameter, integer salary, and job title is a string. So ID is your primary key, so you can set as at auto or increment mode, as whatever you want to set. and then as it is a Java Bean class, so all getters and setters methods are there. Then configuration file. So we all know that we have to map this employee class file into this configuration file. So Hibernate configuration is the tag, within that session factory is the tag, and then this is HBM to DLL.auto represent automatic creating a table, dialect representing the specific driver you required with a specific database, connection URL, username, password, and the class name. But most important thing is this, which class we are going to map with this configuration file. So it's your package name and this is your class name employee, which we have already created. It's a persistent class. Now complete your session factory and complete your Hibernate configuration tag. So this is your configuration file. Now fetch data. In a fetch data, get a name query method will be used. It's a method of, this is the method which used to name the query and returns the instance of the query. We'll see this example. So as it is via annotation, so create annotation configuration object, which will be actually used to create your session object. To create session object, you require session factory object. So configuration or annotation configuration object dot build session factory will give you the session factory object, and session factory dot open session will give you the session object. We know this all things. Now create your Hibernate named query. So session dot get name query find employee by name. Actually we are calling the query, and which in turns call replace this find employee by name with a specific query which we have already defined over here in a persistent class. So it will replace this via this. Okay, now we want to set a string, that name will be Amit. So it will retrieve all records having name Amit. So list employee, so query dot list will give you the result as a type of employee object itself. Why employee object? Because we have created toString method of this tuple, sorry, toString method of this class, so it will retrieve entire tuple. So you can have a multiple tuple in it, so we can use iterator class over here. So employees dot iterator will give you one by one tuple. Check has next, that means is there any kind of next element? If yes, then iterator dot next will give you the employee object and display within the system dot out dot println. So it will give one by one entire tuple. Fine. So this is how we can use this name query into the annotation. Now how we can use this entire thing into the mapping file, that means via XML. So in a XML, one thing we have to create, that is your mapping file employee.hbm.xml. this must be your name of your class. If it is EMP, then use EMP. If it is employee, then use employee. Only change is there, in a Hibernate mapping file you have to mention the table name with the class name, then its property ID, name property, job property, and salary property. And rather than defining a query within the class itself, this is how we can define a query. So this is important. The name is as it is, find employee by name from employee, where e dot name colon name, and use the C data. This is the way through which you can represent the query, but annotation would be quite easy to use it. Then complete your query tag and complete your Hibernate mapping tag. Okay, so mapping is complete. This is your simpler persistent class, because we have already defined query and the rest of the properties into the mapping file itself. Now use this file into the Hibernate cfg.xml. Rest all things will be as it is. So this is how we can use Hibernate named query into the Hibernate. So that's all about HQL, HCQL and Hibernate name query. If you have any kind of doubt, just raise your question into the comment section of this video. Thank you.